Hi guys! In today's video we're going to have a look at another chapter which is going to be about investment appraisal. So let's get started. We're going to have a look at two of the investment appraisal tools, which is payback period and average rate of return. Luckily for us, net present value is higher level content, so this should be fairly short and easy. So in general, before we start looking at the specific tools, we need to define investment, what it means, and also what investment appraisal is all about. So investment is about purchasing capital goods. As we know, this could be some equipment, vehicles, new buildings, and improving fixed assets. So investment is going to be usually about capital expenditure, about some of those long-term assets. And it's, if you break down the definition of these bold terms, then capital goods are defined as the goods that are used in producing other goods, hinting, that those are the machines that are used by businesses in order to produce other goods. So they're not going to be bought by consumers. They're not consumer goods. And the definition of fixed assets is any asset that is going to be kept for longer than 1 year, kept and used. So as you can see, investment is really all about investing in the long term. It's about capital expenditure. It's about buying or either assets, investing into systems which are going to benefit the company in the long term. So what is investment appraisal? Investment appraisal is evaluating the profitability or desirability of an investment project. So whether investing in some specific asset is actually going to be profitable for us. We need to calculate it. If it's going to be desirable. So out of this definition, the two ways how to appraise investment is to do some quantitative appraisal. So this is really looking at the profitability of a project and the liquidity of a project. So we're going to have a look at some financial issues. So quantitative investment appraisal looks into the financial issues, does calculations, looks at it from this from this side, from this angle. However, we can also appraise an investment from qualitative point of view. So here you would be discussing the non-financial issues. So if, for example, two projects are going to be comparable or similar, have similar numbers, so the quantitative analysis is going to give us fairly the same results. Then obviously we can also have a look at the qualitative factors. How many employees is it going to employ? How are we going to benefit the society? What is going to be the environmental impact? How are, in general, our stakeholders going to benefit from our investment, or the other way around? How are they going to be, let's say, affected even in a negative way by our investment appraisal? This is not to say that qualitative investment appraisal is less important. Absolutely not. But since we're in business management and finance, in this unit, we're going to focus mainly on the quantitative side. However, it is important, and definitely in an essay, if you're going to be commenting on two projects or two investments, then definitely mention some advantages and disadvantages from the qualitative point of view as well. So looking or focusing on the quantitative investment appraisal, we can have three tools that we can use. And I already mentioned what those are. And usually we need some information in order to assess or even some information that we're going to insert into those two tools. So the needed information what we need at the beginning is the cost of investment. So basically, how much will I pay for the specific fixed asset or for my capital good? Then, what is going to be the estimated life expectancy? So, in other words, for how many years can I expect returns from the investment? For how many years am I going to be using the machine that it's going to benefit the business that I'm in? Then the next question or next needed information is the residual value of the investment. So at the end of the life expectancy, so at the end of its useful life, we might decide to actually sell the asset for some residual value, and we can estimate for how much we're going to sell it, or we can even have a specific deal, and this would be the residual value. For example, we know that we all in our business we only want to use the newest technology, so we can already plan ahead. We're going to buy a copying machine. We're going to use it for, let's say, 2 years, even though it could be used even for longer. But we just want the newest models all the time, so we're going to buy the copy machine for 2 years, and we can already estimate for how much we're going to sell the copying machine after 2 years. And this would be our residual value of the investment. Then the next one, next information that we need are forecasted net returns from the project. So we've already done cash flow forecasts, and so we know that we need to calculate for investment appraisal what are going to be our net cash flows every year. So we're going to get some cash inflows thanks to the project. We're also going to have some cash outflows thanks to the project or because of the project. So now the net cash flow is the difference between the cash inflows and the cash outflows. In other words, how much do I expect the assets to earn each year if I subtract the running cost? As an example, I can buy a machine, and the cash inflows will be all the revenues that are coming to the business because of my investment. However, I might also hire an extra employee who is going to be operating my machine, and his salary every month is going to be my cash outflow. So in order to calculate the forecasted net cash flows, I would need to take the revenues minus the costs for the employee, so the inflows minus the outflows, and that is going to give us our net cash flows. So these 4 pieces of information is what we need for the quantitative investment appraisal. So the 3 methods, we've already mentioned what they are. It's payback period, average rate of return, and last one is net present value, which is higher level content. Today we're going to look at payback, but before we jump in, we need to know how we're going to forecast cash flows. So this is just some kind of recap of the, let's say, cash flow unit, but only in the sense like what do we need to know from the cash flow unit forecast, for cash flow forecast unit in order to use here in this chapter. So basically forecasting cash flow, how are we going to do it? We are always going to take all the cash inflows minus all the cash outflows, and that is going to give us the annual forecasted net cash flow. We are not going to be looking at the cash flows monthly. That would be too complicated. Most of the questions that we see in the past papers that we're going to have a look at, that we're going to try out, are going to have sort of like the average annual forecasted net cash flows and are going to use those. However, we know from our cash flow unit that forecasting can be quite complicated. It might not be that accurate. So, that is one drawback, definitely, of this method. And that's what makes or appraising investment not, that accurate, uh, and can make it also tricky. So, forecasting is complicated, as we know, because of many external factors, because we might be counting with some, let's say, prices, with some costs, but different trends, recession, I don't know, changing trends um, in the external environment can change those, let's say, numbers that we're using for our calculation. So that definitely complicates the way how we calculate calculate forecasted cash flows. Also, another thing that makes forecasting cash flows hard is because the longer the forecasted time period, the less accurate the forecast might be. So if I'm going to be forecasting, let's say, the following year, it might be very easy for me to calculate. I already have some deals with my suppliers. I know the business condition that my company is in. I know the roughly what are the trends in the external environment. So I can predict my cash inflows more accurately, and I can predict my cash outflows quite accurately. However, as we move on into the future, we need to predict the cash inflows and outflows also for year 2, and also, for example, for year 3, and also for year 4. Then the longer the time period, the less accurate those forecasts are going to be. So definitely we need to count with that as one of the limitations of these tools. If you're using investment appraisal tools in your IA, that might be also another thing to mention in your discussion. For the IB examination, here it's important to say, we always assume that the cash inflows are going to equal the annual revenues earned from the project, and the cash outflows are going to be the annual operating costs. So for the IB examination, the cash inflows and outflows are going to be quite simplified. However, if you're, for example, working on your IA, on your project, if a business is investing in some kind of project, and let's say new offices for employees to be more productive, is that going to generate any specific cash inflows into the business? Is it gonna generate any new revenues? Probably not. But you might find out in your data that certain investments are going to bring you savings. So they're going to actually lower your costs. So in an investment appraisal, even those savings or lower costs could be considered as cash inflows, and you can use that in your investment appraisal, for example, for your IA. But it's good to know that for the IB examination, it's going to be all simple. Cash inflows are going to equal annual revenues, nothing else. So let's have a look at the first method, which is payback. Payback method is defined as the length of time, or sorry, not the method, but the payback is defined as the length of time it takes for the net cash flows that we get from a project to pay back the original capital cost of the investment. Now, what that means, let's have a look at an example. The project, whatever it is, costs $4 million. So that is the original capital cost of the investment. And we know that it is supposed to pay back $1 million per year. So the $1 million per year is going to be our forecasted net cash flows per year. Okay, and so our question is going to be, how long will it take to pay back for the investment? I'm going to give you some time to think about it. Then I'll have a look, show you the answer. How long is it going to take to pay back? Okay, so the answer is the payback period is 4 years. Yeah, it's very simple. 4 divided by 1 equals 4. But this is a very simple example where we estimate the annual, the forecasted net cash flows to be same each year. So 1 million every year for forever, let's say, okay, or for the expected life of the investment project. However, the forecasted net cash flows can change every year. It might be smaller at the beginning, then increase, or the other way around. So here I'm going to show a different example and show how we would calculate payback period in such an example where the project actually pays back a different amount each year. So here in this example, the project also costs 1 million and each year it pays back a different amount. See table, which I'm going to show you right now. And the question is going to be the same. What is the payback period? So we can draw it nicely, neatly in a table, such as this one. And we see on the left side the year and at which we are looking. And then we can see the annual net cash flows per year. So what we have at the beginning, we also insert year 0. This is the year where we actually make the investment. It's the time period in which the investment is made. That is why the cash flow is negative and it is in brackets. So we already put the $1 million here into brackets. That means here we made the investment. Now, every year in year 1, we get $600,000. In year 2, we generate $300,000 of net cash flows. And in year 3, we generate again $300,000. And then in year 4, we actually decide to sell the machine or the project, and the $200,000 is going to be our residual value, or it basically says it's including the residual value. So what do we do now? Like, how do we calculate payback? We cannot calculate it the same way as we did before. So what is suggested is that you actually create a second column to see how, let's say, what are the cumulative cash flows. But for those of you who maybe don't understand what cumulative cash flows means, like straight away, think of it as like the state on my bank account. If I made an investment at the beginning, or like not the state of my bank account, but basically how did my bank account change? So at the beginning, I invested 1 million. So now I have minus 1 million, let's say. Then I get 600,000 back. So now I actually have already minus 400,000. Then I get 300,000 back. So that we add that, we get one or minus 100,000. And again, in year 3, we get some extra net cash of 300,000. And whoops, we already got over 0. So now we are in the positive numbers. We have plus 200,000. And then it continues. So where does payback happen? when do we actually pay back for the cost of the investment? Well, it's not going to happen in year 2, right? Because at the end of year 2, we still don't have enough. We still are like in the negative numbers. We have minus $100,000. So we know that it's going to happen in year 3, but also not at the end. So it's going to happen in year 3, but after more than 2 years. So we know that the year 3 is the year when payback happens. Now, what we need to do in order to calculate the let's say the amount of months that it takes to pay back is we actually use this formula: additional cash flow needed divided by annual cash flow in year of payback. So the purple one is additional cash flow needed. We after 2 years we still need $100,000 to get to pay back, divided by $300,000. Okay, so that is how much we would get in that specific year. Then we multiply it by 12 and we get 4. Just try it out. Just try to insert those numbers in a calculator. Just make sure you don't put minus 100 because it's asking you how much additional cash flow do you need. Well, I need additional 100,000 to get to 0. So you actually put in 100,000 at the top, divide by 300,000 times 12. That equals 4. Okay, so the answer would be the payback period is 2 years and 4 months. Now, some of you might be like, what? Why 2 years? Well, no, why not 3 years? Well, think about it. This is why I actually like use these like visual like ways how to visualize it, what I'm talking about, because payback is happening in year 3. Think of it as like in year 2023. However, it happens after we've completed 2 years, and it's going to happen in, let's say, April, so after 2 years and 4 months. So make sure that you always kind of think clearly, don't get confused. The maths is fairly easy, but you need to think what is going on behind the numbers a little bit. So we know that the payback period is 2 years and 4 months. Okay, let's have a look at another example. So very often you might get the exercises in the test are going to get harder, but very often you might get just a table like this, which is going to show you the annual net cash flows and the cumulative cash flows. So then it's going to ask you, okay, what is the payback period? So again, what do? We know we have this formula: additional cash flow needed divided by annual cash flow in year of payback times 12. But now we need to just make sure, okay, what numbers do we put where? We know that payback is happening in year 3. So the annual cash flow in year of payback is going to be 150. That's going to be a red number. And we know that the additional cash flow that we need is 50,000. Because like this much money we need at the end of year 2 in order to pay back, in order to get to 0. So these are going to be our the numbers that we're going to use. And the red one is showing us the year of payback. So, but we only use this number. So it's going to be 50,000. Again, divide by 150,000 times 12. How much is that going to be? Try it out. It's going to be 4 months. So the payback happens in or during year 3, but the payback period is 2 years and 4 months. Okay, we need to, that's why there's an exclamation mark for you to actually pay attention to the phrasing, that you use the right terminology. Payback happens in or during year 3, but the payback period is 2 years and 4 months. So to evaluate the payback method, what are the disadvantages? What are the advantages? Well, the advantage is that it is quite quick and easy to calculate. At least like if the annual forecast and net cash flows are the same as in the first example, just 4 million divided by 1 equals 4 years. So it is quite easy and quick to calculate. The results are quite easily understood. We basically know when we're going to get back our investment. And here the emphasis, or in this tool, the emphasis on speed of return of cash flows gives the benefit of concentrating on the more accurate short-term forecasts of the project's profitability. Basically, we are going to be preferring those projects where the payback is shorter. And therefore, we are doing short-term forecasts there. The short-term forecasts are going to be more accurate. So this is actually both an advantage, but as we're going to see later, when I discuss disadvantages, it could also be one of the disadvantages. Another advantage is that the result can be used to eliminate or screen out projects that give returns too far into the future, especially if we know that our business needs, to pay back for the machine like straight away in order so that we survive. Like if you think of it, some let's say investments of startups. Most startups, 90% actually go bankrupt or fail in the first 2 years. So in those cases, payback is very important. Short payback periods are very important. Also, it is particularly useful for businesses where liquidity is of greater significance than overall profitability. Liquidity, think of like how much cash do I have, how able am I to pay for my short-term liabilities. That is a very important indicator in the short term. Obviously, in the long term, we care about profitability as well, or more sometimes. The disadvantages, however, it does not measure the overall profitability of a project. What does it mean? Indeed, it ignores all of the cash flows after the payback period. It may be possible for an investment to give a really rapid return of capital, but then to offer no other cash inflows. So again, this is kind of referring to the fact that payback obviously is going to prefer the projects where payback is happening faster. If I have two investments, two, let's say, machines that I'm deciding between, one is going to pay back in 1 year and the second one is going to pay back in 3 years. If I only focus on the payback period and not the profitability of the project as a whole, then I might prefer automatically the machine that is going to pay back in year 1. However, this might be a little short-sighted, because if we then measure the profitability of the project, we might find out that the machine with the longer payback period is actually more profitable. This concentration on the short term may lead businesses to reject very profitable investments just because they take some time to repay the capital. So this is what I kind of said here before. And also, and this is super important, it does not consider the timing of the cash flows during the payback period. It actually, if I just do a little quick introduction into the time of cash flows and what does that mean? What is better for a business to get? Is it better for them to get $100,000 today, or is it better for them to receive $100,000 in a year? If you receive $100,000 today, it's obviously better because it's first of all, it's sure. There is no estimates. I mean, there can be a lot of changes happening in one year. You might not even get the $100,000 in the second year. There's also inflation. So the idea is that we prefer cash flows that are coming to us sooner rather than later. And also, in case we get cash flows, let's say in 5 years, we need to somehow uh, count or calculate their value in today's money. So the idea is that payback period, to summarize, the idea is that payback period does not take into consideration inflation and other things that are affecting the value of the cash flows. Okay, I would like to stop right here. We've covered payback method. Now it would be good to practice some of those exercises that I'm going to share. And in our next video, we're going to have a look at the other tool, the average rate of return.